Welcome to the next level of your greatness by Andreas Dudas, the Legacy Maker podcast. In these episodes, Andreas shares some powerful stories of great people who are positively shaping the world of tomorrow with their purpose-driven legacy. It's Andreas's goal to extend his personal tools and even mistakes to the greater community of those who wish to transform their life while gaining extraordinary success, not only on a personal journey, but with others, and interviews with those who've created a legacy of impact from all over the world on 5 continents. And now here's your host, Andreas Dudas.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my so-called Legacy podcast. Today, I have the real pleasure, I call it a privilege or an honor, to talk to you, Pam. I was reading, I've been reading your book, especially the Living Big book, various times, and it has been a great inspiration to me all the time. It also helped me to follow my calling, my journey. I think you already left sort of a legacy with me, to be honest. I think you made a huge impact, and therefore it's a real pleasure to have you here on my podcast. You are a very well-renowned personality across US and also across Europe and all over the world, most probably because you've written one or even more New York Times bestsellers. But all the same, I just want to summarize quickly who you are. You are living or located in the US, I guess, and you can tell a little bit where exactly. You are the author of 20 books or even more, 2 screenplays, a live soap opera, TV series, magazine articles. And you've been doing this job, you write on your website for more than 25 years. And then I will also dive into this, on how you found your passion, your purpose in life. So you have followed, when I read your biography, I got the impression that you've always known what you want to do in your life. You've always known your purpose. Is that right or not? And if not, how did you find this passion? That's the first question. And there's a follow-up question. How did you dare to follow this passion, the purpose? Because that's a big issue, at least with a lot of my friends and colleagues and clients, to develop this courage. Please, Pam, go ahead.
Well, I feel very, very blessed that I've known from the time I was a small child what I wanted to do. And I think a lot, and that is be a writer and express myself creatively. And I think the thing that enabled me to do it is I was just naive enough to think this could be possible. Because until you believe something like that could be possible, you won't dare to do it. So a lot of people will tell you that, oh, you can't make it as a writer. In fact, I remember reading a study somewhere or some poll that they'd taken. And if you take all the writers, put them together and then average out the amount of money they make, it was something like $3,000 a year. And how can you live on that? But despite hearing those kind of stories, despite the fact that my mother said, you should go into computers, I decided to do the thing that I love to do. Now, I've done many versions of writing over the years. I started out as a journalist. So, that's one form of writing. And that's one that, at the time, journalism may not be the easiest career these days. But back when I started, it was right in the Bernstein Woodward days, so it was a good thing. It was a good career to be in. So I was a journalist for a while, although I wrote features. And then very quickly, I just really longed to write about what was burning in my heart. These things, these big questions, the meaningful things. So I left, working for a newspaper and struck out on my own as a freelance writer. And the thing that's been so beautiful about this career and following this passion is that as a writer, you can write about so many different things. So, for example, I love to travel. I've been able to write 3 books for National Geographic. I've been able to travel all over the world as I wrote about it. So if there's a person I want to meet, that's what's kind of cool now about these podcasts. People can, hey, let's do a podcast and you can meet people you want to. But I've been sort of doing that forever because I would get an assignment to write an article about someone, and then I'd get to meet them because then I'd be writing about them. So writing was a good way for me to express what I wanted to do, but it was also a great way for me to kind of satisfy these other desires that I had for traveling, for meeting certain people. So it's just been such a blessed career. And I just feel so lucky that I've been able to, make a living as a writer. And it's just been it's been a great life.
Mm. Okay, so you're actually, in this sense, a living example to show people on how to follow your passion, right? If I believe the statistics, especially in Switzerland or across Europe, they say that less than 90% of all the people they have, that less than 90% have found their purpose, their clarity on what they would like to do, and even less dare to live up to their purpose or their calling, to their passion. What do you think in terms of telling these people, first of all, on how could they find their clarity? How can they gain more clarity on their passion or on visions, on their dreams? Are there any tips and tricks?
Well, I don't know that I have any real particular tips, but I do feel that if you follow your curiosity, that will lead you. What are you curious about? And anything that kind of catches your attention, you sort of follow those breadcrumbs and you'll find something that you like. I also sometimes would suggest going back to, what did you love as a child? Before society gets a hold of us and says, okay, you need to do a practical career, you need to do, the thing that society tells you to do. What was it you loved to do as a child? So I often say that's a good place to look. If people are confused about what they want to do, what was the thing you loved that you couldn't wait to do as a child? That's one way to look. And then also, what are you really curious about now? And I think there's so many opportunities now because of the internet, because we are so connected, to really be able to follow your passion and turn it into something beautiful. So I do feel like more and more people are becoming entrepreneurs and doing things online. And so I feel like there's a lot of opportunities right now for that. And I do feel it's very important to do what you love, though, as you said, finding your passion, because that's the thing you do, even if you didn't make money doing it, because then you're going to love doing what you do. And you want to think, I feel like we all want much more meaningful lives. And a lot of it goes back to those stories that we're taught as kids, that there's scarcity in the world and that we're separate. And if we believe those things, then we often go for safety. We go for the things that seem, the best for security, but security isn't really the way to go or to find meaning, I don't think.
Exactly. Now the topic about following this journey of following your passion and also developing the courage or to dare to do this, this is really big issue, I think, and we have so many depressed people out in the world and people suffering from sickness and health issues and so on and so on. And what do you think? When I read the newspapers here in Switzerland, there was just an article this week in one of the bigger newspapers, and a journalist wrote that I think more than 30-40% of all the people are looking for new jobs this year alone. So they are in the process of changing their job. There's a sort of a purpose, a meaning crisis going on out in the society. Do you think that the consciousness for living a more meaningful life is changing, shifting towards a higher level of getting conscious of that? Or what's your impression?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think people are tired of following the party line, I feel like the whole story that we've been taught is important is shifting. It's almost like literally flipping over. So I think people don't want to settle for things that don't bring them meaning. They don't want to spend their time doing things that are they don't even know why they're doing them. Because I agree. I've seen those kind of statistics too, that a lot of people aren't happy in their job and they're wanting something else. But I feel like I have a book called Art and Soul Reloaded, and I have a question in there about creativity. And it says, in America, we have these tests like the LSAT to see if you get into law school and the MCAT if you can get into medical school. But so here's my test for, are you creative? is it has one question. Are you breathing? And if you are breathing, that means you are very creative. And I think all of us long to express our creativity. And I think we can't even, I think imagination is so important. And I think we can imagine a whole new world, a whole new way of doing life. And I feel like we're going through the growing pains right now of doing that. Why people are being dissatisfied with their jobs. Because as people are satisfied, they're not going to move to the bigger picture, right? So it might be a bit painful sometimes to get to that other level, but I feel that it's really important. So that's what I see as a sign of we're recognizing that the old way is no longer serving us. And it's time to move to a whole new way to find, lives of more meaning and purpose.
Concerning this courage issue, I think that's a big issue which concerns me also a lot, how to find the courage, to follow really your intuition or your passion, whatever it is, I see some friends and colleagues, they are stuck in their CEO positions, top management positions, for example. They make a lot of money, and then they suddenly, at the age of 40, 35, 50, it doesn't matter when, they feel they should change because they feel that's not the right thing to do. And then they say, but Andreas, I don't know whether I can shift my career or even learn a new profession, take an apprenticeship as a watchmaker, for example, because I do not know whether I can make enough money. It's always very often this money issue. And then your fears drive you towards the wrong direction. What would you respond to such people? When they tell you, Pam, it's fine. You're a famous writer and most probably make your money. That's fine. But I can't do it because I'm stuck and I don't believe in myself. What can we do? What's your advice?
Well, I'm a big believer in spiritual topics, as you probably know from having read some of my books. And I do believe there is guidance available to all of us if we can quiet that fear. And we are taught to be fearful. From the time we're born, we are taught that it's a scary world out there. And that is, the belief. So anything we can do to calm our nervous systems, meditation is a good way to do that. But whatever we can do to calm our minds, then that guidance will start coming in. And here's a story that I love so much. It shows how much fear drives us. But there was a woman who got lost in this big jungle in Hawaii. Her story was all over the news in America for a while. For 17 days, she was stuck out in this, was out in Hawaii in this big jungle, and she left her phone, her water, and her wallet in the car. She was just going to go for a quick 20-minute walk. Well, it ended up, she got lost for 17 days. And she said she was so afraid. There was so much fear, as you can imagine. She's falling down these ravines and she didn't know where she was. She had no way to contact anybody and she had no water. She was totally afraid. And finally, I think it was the second or third day, she just closed her eyes and she said, God, bigger thing, field of infinite potentiality, which is what I call it. To me, it doesn't even matter what you call it, but there's this life. That's my favorite word right now, this life force. Please, when I open my eyes, I want this fear to be gone. So she opened her eyes, and from that moment on, she was guided completely. Go this way. You can eat this, drink this. It was full on complete guidance. And that is what I believe is available to all of us, that guidance. But we do need to lessen the fear. And I think, different people have different ways of doing that. But whatever we can do to kind of deactivate our hyper nervous systems, that are always, following this story and always being afraid, because fear is going to block us every time. Fear is just this big wall between us and our correct purpose. It's the big wall between us and having a society that works for everybody. As long as we're living in fear, we're unable to access that love that all of us are. We are meant to love. That's what we are driven to do. And as long as we fear, you can't have both. It's like each coin has two sides. You're either on one side of the coin or you're on the other. So whatever works for anybody to lessen their fear. And I think then that guidance will come, and that nerve, if you want to call it that, you're willing to take more risks if you're no longer living in fear. So I don't know if I'm giving you very concrete things.
Oh, that's
And again,
perfect.
I come from a little bit different angle. I think you're more, the business angle. I'm more from, the artistic, spiritual angle. But those are some things that have worked for me and that I think I think they work for everybody, but we're often not taught to, focus on that. And by spiritual, I mean just the non-material. I do feel that there is this bigger voice, this other life force that is always there for us. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's dive quickly into this spiritual world, and I read a lot of spiritual books, and I discovered just 10, 15 years ago my spirituality, because I was working for a long time in India, and then this opened up my heart and my mind and everything, and a lot of things changed in my life. I also discovered a few talents lying dormant inside me, and then I had also to start to dare to show up with the spirituality, do you think there is a coincidence out there in the universe? Let's put it that way. I've been growing up here in Switzerland. So a lot of people in India, for example, in the poor regions, they tell me, Andreas, you've been a lucky guy for the last 50 years. You've been growing up in Switzerland. It's a rich country, a highly developed country. I mean, it's easy for you, to follow your dreams and to grow up something and to develop your visions and so on. Do you think there's a coincidence, or is this also a specific task we all get at the very beginning of our lives, and our soul is looking for these challenges, sort of? Or what's your opinion about this?
I think I believe in the life force that just continues on. So I do feel like we do have some say in which culture we're born into. But I also think it's really important. And one of the things that, happened for me, I've been in fact, I was just there in January. And I think we sometimes tend to put hierarchies like, oh, living in a wealthy country somehow is better or bringing you more happiness. And yes, it does provide that, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it does, to have that sort of, material security is a nice thing. But I think it also drives us not always to meaning, not always to happiness. And sometimes I find people in countries that don't have some of the benefits that we do actually have more meaning, more family connections, more community than some of us do in these so-called wealthy countries. So again, that goes to those beliefs, that paradigm that we live under, that this is the most desirable, that material things are the most desirable. I personally don't feel that. I don't feel that it does bring about happiness. And that's why we're seeing these surveys in, your country and my country about people being so unhappy. So this story, again, to me, we have to change consciousness. I started that 222 Foundation in honor of my daughter to change the consciousness of the world. And I think until we have those big changes in consciousness, we're going to keep seeing things going the way they're going. But I feel like there's so many shifts that are happening right now. It's not what you read about in the news, but I feel like even the media is going through, incredible shifts as well. So yes, things are totally shifting. And I don't even remember now what the original question was there, but
That's fine,
yeah.
perfect. There's just another question which pops into my mind, the spirituality thing, I've been growing up in very poor conditions, to be honest, My father spent more than 10 years in a prison up in Russia because he dared to fight against the communists just to live up to his values and principles. But the question is, then I studied at the university. I'm civil engineer and so on, and also studied economics, took an MBA. So from a rational point of view, I was educated just in a way that you have to analyze everything, and you just have to believe in things which you see on paper or as a result. Now more and more people, also top managers and leaders in our organizations, they realize there is much more than this. There is this spiritual world, and more people travel to certain countries in order to find that out. What do you think? What's your perception? Is this changing now faster? Is there more acceptance out in the society, out in the companies for the spiritual world, for building the bridge between the rational world and the spiritual world? What's your perception?
Well, I think it's really happening for sure. This new telescope, this James Webb telescope, we're seeing so much of a bigger picture now. That's just one example. And I think it's widely recognized that, what we see with our eyes, what we're able to actually see with our eyes is only 5% of what's there. Like there's all this black energy, they call it dark energy, dark matter. And we don't even understand exactly what it is, but we know it's there by, the gravitational pull and all this. So much of what we see is very limited. I mean, as much as 4 to 5%, we're only seeing just a small amount of what's possible. So I feel like it's accelerating, this belief in these unseen forces, which to me is where all the power comes from anyway. And power, that's not a word I really like, where the dignity, the peace, the whatever comes from, the what's another word for power? I'm not, but where things can happen, where alchemy can happen, so to speak.
Perfect. Let's dive a little bit into my favorite book, Living Big. What's the great or the big idea behind this book? Can you describe that quickly? Just the essence of the book, and how did you arrive at this vision, let's call it like this, to write such a book on living big, and what does it mean to live big?
Well, I've always believed that more was possible than what we're told, what we're taught. Again, that cultural paradigm. And so living big to me was about going beyond the story that we're taught. And so, I have different chapters in there about loving big, about creating big, about doing things in a way that supersedes those lessons that we're taught, those limitations. We're taught that the world is limited. We're taught that there's scarcity. And so this is a way of going bigger. And so I tell stories in there about a lot of people that have found a different way to live, that have found lives with more purpose and meaning. And, I wrote that book so long ago. I'm trying to remember what inspired me to write it. I've always believed, though, I suppose, it was my book to write, that there's these muses out there. Again, I believe in a lot of, unseen things, but it was given to me to write, like from the muses, from, whatever that is. I mean, I can't even put words on it. Anytime you put words on something, it sort of, slows it down a little bit. But it's this idea I had. I think we're all given these ideas, but we often just poo-poo them and say, oh, no, that's not mine to do. But as we start hooking in and listening more to that voice, we will be led. And so this book to me was really given to me from my higher power, from, whatever you want to call the unseen forces that are out there.
In this book, you describe a lot of stories, or some people, great people, I call them normal people, who are on the one hand maybe wealthy, on the other hand not wealthy at all. To me, they make a real impact, a real difference, because they dare to follow their purpose or dream or whatever it is, and also they start to build up a legacy while still being alive. Many people, they talk about legacies, they do not talk anymore about that, but other people talk about them. Oh, they left a great legacy. Can you just give us one example or two short examples of people who made a huge impression on you concerning leaving a legacy or building up a legacy during their lifetime? Maybe also somebody you described in your book,
Well, I mentioned that I just went to India, so I'll tell you a little bit about Service Space and Nipun Mehta, who has just inspired me so much. He was went to Stanford, was a Silicon, on that path to, become, probably do a startup and, what all. But when he was still working for Sun Microsystems, he just felt he wanted more. He just felt, so he started out volunteering. And, so on the weekends when he wasn't working, he'd volunteer. He worked at a homeless shelter or a kitchen. And then he started wanting to do more and more. And eventually he completely quit his job and he decided he was going to be a full-time volunteer. He was going to do his part to make a difference in the world. Here he was in his 20s. I mean, and like what? He hasn't made all this money. He's just going to be a full-time volunteer. Everything Service Space does is completely through volunteer work. Nobody gets paid. Everybody does it out of the goodness of their own heart. He now has more than 1 million people that have signed up to work with Service Space. Like when I was in India, we had people from 17 countries, that he had invited to talk about these kind of issues you're talking about. How can we live a life of more purpose? What can emerge from, great minds coming together? But the thing that's so amazing, he just kept following his, follow your beeps. I often say, that little thing that makes you come alive. Keep following that curiosity. And Nipun did that. And the impact, he served on President Obama's, some council with President Obama. He has people volunteering for him. Politicians from Austria were there, in India, people from all over the world that are doing these amazing things. And just because he followed his desire to do this, and what he does, because it's all volunteer, people can't even get their minds around it. Like I one time pitched, I wanted to do a story about him for People magazine, which I used to write for some. And my editor's like, well, how does he live? How does he survive? People can't even understand it. It's so far out of the realm, but he has impacted so many people by just kindness, being kind, and making these small ripples. And it's just amazing. We can't get our minds around it. That's the thing. You were talking about being so analytical, and I think we're all kind of analytical because it doesn't make sense. So much of following your passion doesn't make sense, but you do it because you have this drive and because you settle down the fear, and you're listening to that voice that's saying, I need to do this. I want to make a difference here. So Nipun is one who has made a big impact on my life. One year, the 222 Foundation, we gave every year on 222, February 22nd. I guess you guys say the 22nd of February. We did we gave our donation to Nipun Mehta and Service Space. So people do feel inspired to help fund them. So, everything works out for them. But again, they're doing their passion. So he's someone who's made a huge difference, who has definitely lived big. Some of the people I wrote about in the book, I don't know if any of them stood out to you that you would like me to talk about. I know there was one woman, this was kind of nice. She decided she wanted to just go around and do kind acts, and she quit a job. She was stressed out. So she and her husband bought an RV, and they just drove around and found people doing beautiful things. And I think they did it on the internet, as I recall, or they might've written a book. It's been a while since I've written that book, but their whole task was to go around and find these stories about people that were doing beautiful, kind things. And it sounds like that's what you're doing a little bit here on your podcast is, finding those people, because it's like that 4-minute mile. After the first person ran the 4-minute mile, we all started believing it was possible. So to me, to have these kind of conversations and to read about people, to talk to people, to hear about people that are doing things that we think are impossible, inspire us to say, well, maybe I could do that. So the more we have that conversation, as opposed to this, no, you can't, it's impossible, everything's limited. If you have that conversation, you're stuck there. So I think the more and more we have these kind of conversations about what could be possible, the more things become possible. And that's why what you're doing, the work you're doing so beautiful, is you are, really focusing that this can happen. This is possible. We can leave a legacy. This is what we're meant to do. So thank you for, having these kind of conversations and inspiring people to don't listen to that old story. Don't listen to your fear. Listen to that thing that's calling you, that thing that you really are curious about. If it's just simple curiosity, follow that.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing all these stories. We could keep on talking about such stories for another 2-3 hours. You have so many things experienced in your life, but getting back to, I call it benefit or the motivation to follow your purpose or the passion in your lives. There are, I know, many wealthy people, highly successful entrepreneurs. They have achieved everything in their lives, but they still feel a sort of an emptiness. And that's what I experienced over many decades, and suddenly my eyes were opened up and I was thinking, hey, there's much more. I'm still not happy. I'm not fulfilled. There's more out there. It's not about the money issues, things like that. But I realized for sure, if you have the money, if you're wealthy, and you can combine that with unleashing your true purpose, you can achieve a lot of things for this planet. Then you are on mission for Earth. You are not on mission for a client anymore. What do you think? This is always my provocative question to top managers and founders and entrepreneurs in companies. What would happen on our planet if everybody, each person dared to live up to his or her true purpose? What do you think? What would happen with our planet?
Well, to me, it's that more beautiful world that we all know is possible. We just feel it in our bones. Don't you just feel it that we can have this world where everybody has a home, everybody is fed, everybody is cared for? That is what we all want, where we're all doing meaningful work. And if we can believe that to be possible, we can make that happen. I feel like, there's a lot of shift now to more like indigenous wisdom, people that, before, the big capitalist thing took over the world, people were living more simply on the earth. They were having more time for family and community. So I feel like there's a shift more to interest in that sort of thing. And we're kind of seeing the end of that old way of being. Now, whether it will happen in my lifetime, I don't know. But, I just keep doing the things that I feel called to do that kind of are curious to me. And I'll just do my small part. I'm connected to everyone. We're all connected to everyone. So one little step I might take in the right direction is moving us in that way. So all I can do is what I can do in my small way, but I feel like each small action makes ripple effects that go out into the world. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, great. No, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just checking the time. I have many more questions. So, anyways, but I want to dive quickly into your great book, E Squared, on how to, I call it on how to manifest your dreams or your wishes, whatever it is. And there are so many books out there, and also coaches and trainers, and it has been a real hype. It's still a hype, to show people on how they can manifest their dreams. And you have described some nice tools or some principles and rules, these, I think 9, or how many tools, how many steps? 9?
Well, 9 experiments that I ask people to do, because, I can talk about this stuff forever, but until you see it with your own 2 eyes, you don't believe it. You want to really take it in and trust it for yourself. And so that's why I set it up in a way that, here, try this, see if this works. Don't take my word for anything. Don't take anybody's word for it. Does it work for you? So that is really was the idea behind E Squared. And it's principles that we've known about forever. I mean, it says in the Bible, ask and ye shall receive. You're going to, manifest into your life what you're interested in, what you're putting your attention upon. And if you keep putting your attention upon fear and problems, you're going to get more fear and problems. If you put your attention on possibility, I always talk about you either living in problem state or you're living in possibility state. And E Squared is just a way to help people learn to live in possibility state.
What do you think? I mean, what I wanted to ask you is actually the sheer number of these trainers and coaches and so many books shows that there are still masses of people who have not, how shall I put it, not discovered or experienced or just they don't get it on how to manifest, in a way. They're still looking, then there's a new book coming out and so on. So there must be some barriers out there lying inside us, barriers, wrong belief systems, maybe fears, doubts, concerns, all these things which prevent us from really getting what we deserve in the end. Based on your experience and based on what you have written and also felt, by writing this book, and I think you got also from a higher, let's call it power or higher force, and you got these inputs for writing this book, what do you think? What is the biggest barrier for all these people, for many people, for not getting what they deserve and what they wish to get? What do you think?
Well, I think the same barrier that I mentioned before, they're fearful. They're just doing kind of a hit and miss sort of thing. Like even E Squared, it's just sort of a starter kit, so to speak. It's just a way to begin to recognize, to see how what you're thinking about, does kind of brings back into your life. But I think a lot of it's just old habits. People are used to looking at life a certain way. They're used to focusing more on what's wrong, what problem they have, how can I fix this problem? And in fact, one of my books is about gratitude. And I think one of the best ways to get on a more energetic frequency that brings things to you, if you're still interested in things. But when I say the things I want to manifest are like compassion and love and beauty, those are the things I'm interested in. I don't even, material things don't really interest me that much. But again, I'm lucky. I have, those things that I need. But if we focus on all our blessings, and I mean, it, like, we're all alive, our heart is beating, it's pumping all this blood through our body. I mean, just the simplest thing, the sun came up this morning. I guess the moon may be coming up for you where you are, but it's like so many beautiful things, and we don't have to do anything. We were given this gift of life. And if we really start appreciating and being grateful for just these little things that are huge things, and I think because of the strong emphasis on marketing, we're taught that, oh, we don't have enough. We need this. We're not good enough. That's the whole thing that our fear teaches us to do, but that's not true. So to me, the most powerful thing anybody can do, there I use that word again, but the most potent thing that we can do is to start with gratitude and start appreciating what we have right now. And everybody has nature. Everybody, you can look at the sky, even if you're in a city, you can still see the sky. So to start appreciating all that we have right now, what you appreciate appreciates, so to speak.
Okay. Absolutely great. What I realized is that, and it took me almost 50 years or even more, is that each time I put all my love and my passion into something I create based on my uniqueness without expecting any reward and any return, then amazing things suddenly start to happen, And I've been educated. I was educated as an engineer, as an economist, stuff like that, as a manager and so on. And I always was forced or driven to deliver results, and we had to set goals, but we had to change our budget goals every 3 months because they were not useful anymore. They did not work out anymore. And I had to learn just to let go and to allow the universe or the life to deliver, based on what you put in. And I think love has one of the highest degrees or levels of energy in the end, which will get us a really high degree of reward then in terms of being fulfilled and happy. I think on most of the things you would agree, I guess,
Oh, for sure. That is so true. Putting love into things, that is the secret right there. So yes,
Absolutely. Great.
love and
Okay.
gratitude.
So Pam, looking into the future, so what is your vision? Do you have a vision, or are you just in the here and now and in the present, just to allow what happens, or do you have a dream for the planet, for yourself, for people? What is, is there
Well,
something here?
I'm very much into living in the moment. I'm very much into hanging out with nature, and also listening for what is mine to do, because I do feel like I'm connected, like we all are, to each other and to this bigger force. And so the more I live in the moment, the more I can hear, what's mine to do. I will continue to write because I love to write. But what that writing might be is, I don't know. I mean, I guess, waiting for my next assignment from universe. But it's, to me, really important to be in this moment and to really be into gratitude and appreciation. So I don't have any life-changing plans. I mean, in the old paradigm, what I'm doing doesn't sound very remarkable. Oh, you're living in the moment. What does that mean? But to me, that's the connection. In that moment, you're connected to everything, and things will happen exactly as they're meant to happen. And I have a lot of faith in that. And I feel that I will continue to love and serve, another day to love and serve. And that's my motto.
So this means, in a nutshell, if you love and serve, then you leave or you build automatically a legacy, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to save hundreds of thousands or millions of people and launch huge projects. It just, I think, really to dare to love yourself first in order to share this love with other people and then to serve, really. Yeah, I
Mhm.
fully agree.
Oh.
Based on your book projects, just a question popped into my mind when this afternoon I started to read again E Squared, just to inspire myself a little bit for this conversation along with you. And then I asked myself, wow, all this wisdom and these words and all these conclusions, great. Do you conduct any research before you write a book, or is it just pure intuition? Or how does this work? Do you get inspired by, let's call it again, a higher power out there somewhere? Or how does this work?
Well, both. And depending on, like I said, I was a journalist for a long time. So I've
Mhm.
done a lot of interviewing, researching. So yes, I do some research, but I feel like the best things, when I hook into that, what you might call the muses, that higher power, life, I'm sort of led into what to write, maybe even led into who I need to meet, to talk to give me the information that I need. So it's kind of a combination. Maybe the bigger idea might come from something besides me. And then I do the due diligence, the whatever research I need to do to make sure that I'm, being led in the right direction. So it is a combination. But I
Okay.
do feel like the best symphonies that are written, the beautiful artwork, it comes from a place higher than us. And I feel like my best writing also does come from a place higher than me. So, but I also do like to research things as well. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Before we end this conversation, one last question. Would you like to share anything else with all the listeners out there who will listen to this podcast? Do you have something lying on your heart, a major message?
To believe this more beautiful world is possible, and to believe that you have a part, each listener, each person has a part that will make them supremely happy, that will make them feel that love that they are. And that is the inheritance for all of us, that we are all so deeply loved, we are all connected, and we do have an important part to play in this big life scheme.
Great. Okay. So, last but not least, I'm quoting another title of one of your great books, Thank and Grow Rich, So I'm really grateful for this conversation. I just sent out a wish a couple of days ago to have the possibility, the unique opportunity to talk to you, and this wish was fulfilled. And thank you very, very much for this. Really, it was very inspiring, great pleasure. And I wish you all the best, and I'm sure we will meet sooner or later in
Yes.
person somewhere on this planet. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. I've enjoyed it very much, and I do look forward to us meeting in person. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for joining The Next Level of Your Greatness by Andreas Dudas, the Legacy Maker. If you're on a journey to create a legacy of impact, please subscribe so you can join this community with Andreas, who find the important and life-changing value of creating a purpose-driven legacy. For more information, go to andreasdudas.com. Remember, your legacy may just begin here.